Yes.
Yeah, so maybe tell me a little bit about how have you been since then? What has changed for you? Some general life update, maybe.
I had my permanent shift into non-dual awareness or an awakening, or whatever you want to call it. If you put me on the Theravada map, you can say that's fourth path, at least Dana Ingram's map. The shift was in 2020, May 20th, and it has been a year since I talked to you. So when I talked to you, it was a year after my realization, and then now it's been a little bit more than 2 years. And I would say that the realization hasn't changed a bit. You can't really unseen, what's seen. It's the same thing. The vast open space, the stillness, spontaneity, the panoramic awareness, and this whole field is awake to itself, and every single sensation is aware of itself without a center. And everything's unified, so there's no distinction between awareness, sensations, perceptions, phenomenons, attention, and the world. And there's absolutely no sense of agency, very little emotions, except for a very tranquil state of contentment and equanimity. And everything is perceived to be like a hologram, empty and full simultaneously, without any distance or locations. That's pretty much the same. But the way that the Mitsu responds to that insight has changed a little bit. A few months after my realization, I was still going through a lot of energetic shifts. Yeah, still integrating.
Here's an analogy using video games to describe my 3 levels to awakening. First, you are a character, a video game character inside the game, separate with all the other characters without knowing that you are inside the game. Second level, you become the screen, the all-knowing witness, detached from the game and the character, the God consciousness. Third level, the screen and all the characters and the game and the environment merge into one indistinguishable whole. You're also the nothing that manifests the entire game and all variations of all the games and all the characters simultaneously throughout the universe.
But I'm gonna have an edge because I'm already genetically, naturally born more hyper than you. You know what I'm saying? I'm gonna have an advantage because my genes are bad.
And then that energetic shift just become less and less subtle, more and more subtle as the time goes on. And now it's been, I'll say, very stabilized. And the realization just keeps getting deeper and deeper at the cellular level. It's like, I think it sinks deeper and deeper into more areas of your subconscious. So like the nooks and crannies of maybe like, the debris of the conditionings gets cleansed out at a deeper and deeper level. Yeah. I think I've heard a lot of teachers that went through this process and they've been awakened for like 20, 30 years. They said it usually takes up to, and that's how they observe in their students as well. They say it usually takes up to 5 to 7 years for the realization to be more or less completely integrated. Yeah, I think Xi Jinping said it took him like 10 years to feel enlightened or something like that. Yeah, and for some reason the year 7 years is they say it's usually just 7 years. I don't know. This number is very interesting. I don't know why it's 7 years. Yeah, but yeah, it takes a while for the process to unfold. Basically, the way I describe it is pretty much you're getting a new car. Yeah, with this new operating system, and we can talk about the implication of that and what that entails. But basically, you get a new car. Before, you were driving like a car in, like, the driver's seat. You think you're in control. You're just driving the car, and then after the shift, you're like, holy shit, I was never in the driver's seat. I was actually in the back seat the whole time, and this car is just driving itself. And with this realization, this car, like you change from like just the driver in this front seat to not just the entire car, but the entire world that the car is like driving through, like, because everything is one, right? So in a sense, you get this new infinite car that at first you don't know where the keys even are. You just kind of have to figure it out because it doesn't come with the driver's manual. A lot of like books and YouTube videos about like spirituality and meditation and awakening, they talk about how to get there, right? But very few teachers talk about how to integrate this thing. I think Ade Shante is one of the only teachers that talk about like how do you live with this new presence. He has a book I highly recommend called "The End of Your World." Yeah, that's a really good book. Yeah, so now you have this infinite car, and then how do you drive it? How do you operate it, and how do you interact with other people that are maybe still in the driver's seat, right? And the interesting thing that I realized after 2 years is like, when you just like surrender, like just kick back and like put your leg up in the back seat, this car takes you to places that you never expected. Yeah.
Yeah, sounds really good.
Yeah.
So do you have
it's like an AI, right? Self-driving car.
Yeah.
You're not driving it, but at the same time, you still need to sort of like, tweak it a little bit. Like, yeah, yeah. You still need to learn how to drive the self-driving car. Anyways,
so for people to imagine this, what that you're like speaking to me right now, what does it feel like compared to before? Like when you are no longer in the driver's seat, what changes? For example, people are really identified with what is coming out of this mouse over here versus what's coming out of the people they're talking to. What's the difference there, maybe, to your point of view right now?
When I'm speak right now, when I move my arm, it doesn't feel like I'm moving it. It feels like it's just the causes and conditions of the universe. It's no different. This is the same movement as the wind that's blowing outside. The leaves are moving, and the clouds passing by. And even your voice and my voice, they're in equal footing, equal space. Yeah, like the sensation of my toes and my thoughts right now, and the sensation of the clouds, and the visual sensations of the pixels of the screen right now. They're just arising in the same space, and none of it is really in my control. It's, in a sense, it's just the universe doing this thing. Yeah.
From your point of view, the importance of concentration in practice versus like a kind of letting go, or maybe what you also call do nothing practice.
Do nothing.
How can one get this insight, like through these employing concentration and letting go?
Yeah. Well, first of all, the ego is nothing but the contraction of energy, right? And then how physicists say that energies cannot be like created or destroyed. The same energy of the awake awareness of this vast, boundless space is just a very diffuse version of the ego, actually. Like, so my analogy is like throughout the process of dissolution or using mindfulness power or Vipassana, you're dissolving your entire body mind and your field of experience from solidity to liquid to like lava to mist and then to air. But then air is made out of the same thing as the solidity, right? The solidity is just a more contracted version of empty space or air. So the only reason why we don't experience the world as it is, or experience reality, or experience as it is because of resistance. Yeah. So the ego is nothing more than the resistance or the contraction of energy. Yeah. Due to conditionings, we're sort of contracting this vast space into this tiny little ball that's somewhere in behind our head or in between our eyes, and we're pretending to be perceiving the world through this illusionary observer, seer, thinker, feeler, and doer. So the benefit of mindfulness Vipassana is to use the power of your attention to see through to the illusion of solidity. That's number one, and actually going in there and deconstruct them, dissolve them, and Vipassanalize them into empty space. Yeah. And you can't talk about contraction or the mindfulness training, which is just concentrating on a single object of meditation. Again, that could be the breath, or it could be thought, sight, sound, whatever. Just different elements on different sense doors that sort of congeal together to make up the illusion and the perception of a separate self. Right. So we take that apart through this method of contraction. Like we're zoning in our object of we're honing in our attention, our awareness to dissolve the object of meditation. When you dissolve the object of meditation, you also dissolve yourself as well, right? So we can't really talk about that unless we also talk about the other side of the equation, which is expansion. Yeah. Now, expansion is your do nothing meditation, or like the Zen style kind of training where you just do nothing, pretty much, no techniques. I'll say the only technique of do nothing meditation, if you can call it a technique, is releasing, of letting go. So basically, any solidity you experience in the body mind or in your field of experience, you just kind of notice it and then release it. And the gesture of that release is analogous to how maybe you clench your fist really tight. See, when you clench your face in your fist, that's contraction. That's sort of like the ego state. And then you just notice that and you just let it go and release. So it's not really a gesture of doing. It's more like a gesture of not doing, of letting go. Yeah, so that's the duality between like Zen and Vipassana, expansion and contraction. I think the most efficient way to dissolve solidity is the combination of both the expansion and the contraction. You know, both mindfulness, Vipassana, and the expansion of do nothing, Dzogchen kind of thing. Because a lot of times we talk about mindfulness, a lot of people get into mindfulness and they become super concentrated, like people who go into like Goenka retreats for years on end, but they still haven't completed the process because they haven't realized that they're just training themselves to be better meditators that are concentrating really well on objects of meditation. But the other side of the equation, which is letting go and expansion, a lot of people, they haven't gotten that covered, so they haven't integrated both the expansion and contraction until finally in the natural state they sort of merge as one. Because the way I describe the natural state, or the state of realization, is the perfect merging of max effort contraction and max effort expansion. So you sort of zoom your self to the size that's smaller than an atom, just because it's not even a point. It's not even a point. It's just not dimension. At the same time, you're expanded to infinite space, like through this like singularity that's not even a point. Through that you sort of manifest all of existence, and it's very complicated. It's very hard to talk about that with words, but a lot of Zen masters or whatever, they tell you that once you realize your true nature, you become nothing, and that's how you become everything. That's pretty much what they're pointing to. Yeah, but I will say that even if you only practice Vipassana and only practice mindfulness and just do the concentration, if you take that to the end point, you are going to reach expansion. Yeah, because the more you can expand, the more you can contract, because the mind is like a rubber band. And if you only practice expansion, because a lot of traditions, like the Zen tradition, they just tell you to sit and do nothing, stare at the wall for 20 years. If you just do that for long enough, the ego structure will get dissolved. That's why it's hard for people even just to sit down and do nothing if you never meditated. Let alone tell them to go to the Vipassana retreat. They'll be scared. Why? Because their egos would be afraid to like look at itself, would be afraid of the process of dissolution, because we're constantly bombarded by stimuli, right? When you take all that stimulus away, the conditions of the ego will surface. And as long as you just let it surface, let the solidity release themselves, and just release, let go, surrender, and then you pretty much reach the natural state as well. But again, I find the fastest way is to combine both the expansion and the contraction. Yeah.
So great. Would you say that it is better to train one of those first? Like, is it better to get concentration up first, or can you just start with do nothing?
That's a good question. I think it depends on the individual, but I think for most people, concentration-based training should be first. Yeah, because even like Dzogchen, like the highest teaching of Dzogchen is pretty much do nothing meditation, right? But then even Dzogchen traditions, they ask the practitioners to work on their concentration first. That's why the highest teaching of Dzogchen, they can't give it to you unless you have years of like preliminary practices, like basic mindfulness, concentration, and maybe even Vipassana, right? And then even teachers like Michael Taft, who teaches mostly non-dual meditation, your expansion, do nothing meditation, and every single sit, even though most of his meditation are expansion, every single sit in the beginning, he asks the practitioners to do some shamatha first, which is your concentration, to sort of like warm up the mind, to loop the mind, so you can have you first contract so you can release, right? So the process is almost like it's just like any other process of release, or like any process of like an orgasm. You have to contract really tight so you can release, right? So I would say contraction before expansion is usually the more efficient way to go for most people.
Yeah, that's also my way of seeing things, because when you first come from the West and you research this, and for whatever reason you're interested in meditation, mostly what's out there is concentration practices. When you most of the stuff, so you're most likely to stumble upon those first. And it's also what happened to me. It's you practice concentration usually first for a few years before you even can, I feel, get a sense of what do nothing practice can do for you.
Exactly. Yeah. You have to put in the
And,
effort to be effortless.
right. And when you come to a certain point, and maybe you can say if that's also your experience, when you do nothing, or shine, or what they say in Dzogchen, like to just be disengaged and not involved in your experience, you find that naturally you are becoming very concentrated.
Oh yes, yes,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
So there is actually, from the do nothing point of view, you first you try to let go, but then you don't know really where to go to. Like, what am I going to do now? You have to let go of all this stuff first, and then whatever is left, you look at that basically.
yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah, the way I look at it is like at first you're a character or a meditator is concentrating on an object of meditation. There's still an object-subject split, and once that split is unleashed or unhooked, now it's just a sort of the universe or reality or the experience concentrating on itself. But it's still like a state of concentration. Yeah, it's not a state of concentration that takes effort from the meditator, but in a sense it's still like your mind is still doing something, right? So the mind has to be trained to be concentrated at first on a very specific object. Now it's sort of concentrated on this vast boundless space. And I always say that you can't, even when you access jhanas, like the sixth jhana, like infinite consciousness, whatever, how do you even get there? By concentration. Like, how do you even like hold on to that? By concentration, right? Even though jhana, there's still some kind of meditated there, but still it takes concentration to even like hold that kind of vast empty space, like like it's the stillness of eternity. It takes a lot of power to sort of to maintain, right? Yeah. And then if you look at the teachers that talk about do nothing meditation more, like they're like, oh no, meditation is useless, just do nothing. If you look at their history, they've been practicing meditation, concentration stuff for like years and decades, most of them anyways. Of course language is limited. When I say concentration, in the natural state, concentration isn't even the right word for it. When this whole field is just simply recognizing itself, or you can say being just is itself. There's no effort. It is itself. So it's not an effort at all. And just to call it concentration, yeah, you can kind of call it concentration if you want, because compared to the state before when your mind is completely scattered, it does feel like the universe is quote unquote concentrated on itself. But again, the best way to put it is there's just this. That's it. And this isness is aware because it is itself.
In that same regard, like going from basically concentration to expansion, I think it fits well to describe also practice in that from that viewpoint where, okay, you have concentrated periods of practice. During the day, usually people have 1 or 2 hours time during their regular day to practice. But then there are also retreats, like very concentrated periods of practice. And then there's like general mindfulness during the day, which you could say like it's the expansion part of your practice. Like, how would you compare those two? Like, what's in your experience? What's the importance of a retreat time versus like daily practice? What was your experience there?
For me, retreat really does a lot of damage. Yeah, because like for me, like one retreat for me equals like maybe probably even more potent than practicing for an hour for like a year. Yeah, because for some reason when you work on concentration, like the more and more solid your mind is, the more concentrated you can become, the clearer the insight into like emptiness or no self or impermanence is, right? And the retreat setting is great for that because when we just bumped around the world, there's a lot of distractions, a lot of karmas and conditions that can arise and that can take you out of that state. But the retreat, you don't have a chance for your external stimulus to accumulate. So you just go deeper and deeper and deeper. Yeah, so I think that's one way retreat is very important. And I think taking the practice into everyday life, you can look at that in a couple of ways. The first way is for a more like beginners kind of practice where you kind of try to stay mindful of your everyday environment. So maybe you're talking to someone and then you just try to be mindful and try to create this witness to watch your behaviors and thoughts, just like how you would do on the cushion. But then that's before non-dual awareness is sort of at least have glimpses of or locked in. After non-duality is locked in, after the the awakened awareness is locked in. Maybe it's not entirely stabilized yet. Now I think the most efficient way to practice that is not through the lens of the witness or the observer, because that's been deconstructed to be just more solidity, or more subtle form of the ego. Now that the witness is gone, but then you can still quote unquote be mindful in everyday life, but now you're doing it through the perspective of non-dual awareness. And there's a practice called Vipassana. I don't know if you heard of it. It's like sort of the combination of expansion and contraction. So basically, you're still doing Vipassana in a sense. You're still trying to be, you still try to notice the sensations. You still try to notice what's going on. You still try to, in a more or less mindful way, if you want to put it that way. But then now you're not doing it from the perspective of the meditator. Now you're taking on the broader perspective of awareness itself. And what I like to call it, you're doing Vipassana from the God mind instead of the human mind. Yeah, so I think Vipassana is a really good practice for people that are sort of like integrating, or maybe they have access, they have some glimpses of the fully expanded awareness, but it's not completely stabilized, and they still find themselves, sort of getting triggered in everyday life. And I think that's the practice people should do. You can even do that practice on the cushion as well. I think after the non-dual awareness is pretty much locked in, every time you sit down to meditate, you are doing Vipassana, because after the witness has been deconstructed, it's difficult to just go back to the kind of like the dual Vipassana style training.
Yeah, it takes more effort than resting in that awareness.
Yeah. Now you're resting in that
okay.
awareness, but then you're still kind of practicing. You're still investigating sensations either on the cushion or in everyday life when you're practicing something like the Tantra kind of practice, Dzogchen, where they ask you to bring your realization to everyday life, and then practice just moment to moment, like off the cushion.
Yeah. So when the non-dual awareness is locked in and you are kind of practicing during the day, you kind of try to hold in your awareness the new viewpoint more strongly.
Yeah.
And then is it like everything is like happening in nothingness, or what would you describe it like? Like people that you're talking to, what are they talking to from that point of view? Are they, because they are no longer talking to like you, quote unquote?
Yeah, it's just like the space is talking to itself, or just reality talking to itself, or you can just say the mind is talking to itself. However you want to put it.
From all points of view, from all angles, right?
Yeah, it's like it's like waking up from the identification of the ego mind, or just one thought of the self, to the entire mind. Or you can say waking up from just one character in the video game. At first you're just the main character in the video game, that main avatar. Now you wake up to the entire game. So how do you play this game now that you're like the entire game, you're like sort of all the characters, as a matter of direct experience? I'm not making it into logical statement. I'm just saying, as a matter of direct experience, this Mitsu is an equal footing with the Mitsu like walking on the street. Yeah, it's all just happening by itself. So how do you interact with people when you're in that state? Because at first it could be pretty jarring, it could be disorienting. Yeah, so that's where the integration comes in. At first, when you're trying to stabilize that state, it takes a little bit of practice as well. Even though, like I said earlier, even though it's just you're sitting inside a self-driving car, but you still need to know how to operate that self-driving car, until finally it gets more or less just completely automatic and spontaneous. That even though maybe the practice still goes on, but the effort becomes less and less and less, to a point where it doesn't feel like you're practicing anymore, even when you are. It just feels like everything's just happening by itself.
Going back to what you said about retreats, you said retreats did a lot of damage for you, is that right?
Yeah. So
damaged, what got damaged?
The separation, the separate self. yeah. I got my second retreat, I hit stream entry, which is the first level of awakening on the Theravada path, and I got it on my last sit of the last retreat. And I don't think I've gotten that without the retreat, without like just 10 days of intense concentration. Yeah. So so that was the first time I glimpsed emptiness in my first sensation. Yeah, it was during a retreat.
What was your practice like on those retreats? What was your concentration practice?
The first retreat was I was just following what Goenka was saying. I went to 3 Goenka retreats, Yeah, 10-day Vipassana Goenka retreat, basically just body scanning. So on the first retreat, I just learned the body scanning techniques, and that's all I did because I didn't know how to do anything else. But the second retreat, I was already was a little bit familiar with maybe noting a little bit and self-inquiry. Like I wasn't too familiar with those methods, but I was doing a little bit of it. When sometimes I'll do Vipassana, and then in the back of my mind I'll be sort of like doing inquiries, or maybe even noting the different, because in Goenka retreats they only teach you how to do the body scanning. But then once I learned more about like noting, you can actually, the body just one sense story. You can Vipassanalize sight and sound and thoughts and feelings just the same way. And I practiced a little bit of that on my second retreat. But I'll say 85% of my practice during the retreat was still body scanning. But I think combining self-inquiry, which is just looking for the meditator, looking for the self, looking for the seer, just try to abide in awareness as much as you can. Even though at the time I haven't accessed the non-dual awareness, yes, but I was trying to get there by doing self-inquiry, right? Yeah, and combining that, sometimes where I have breaks, I'll be walking around in the yard and I'll do a lot of like self-inquiry and like awareness of awareness kind of training. Just the combination of the two, I think really did the damage. And also I accessed all jhanas on that retreat, ending with the cessation on the last sit. So I didn't even know what jhanas were actually, just because my mind was very concentrated and I was just going deeper and deeper. Yeah, and if you look at jhanas, it's just concentration, just states of absorption, and it's just because more of your condition are getting uprooted. So number one, you're cultivating sort of like the power to the energy to decondition the solidity of the body mind. And number two, the jhanas can be seen as sort of like just a byproduct of the dissolution.
And would you say, would you agree with Shinzen Yang there when he says like you can either go deep or you can go broad in your practice? Like you can focus in on one thing, like do only one thing and basically go all the way with that, or like also shift up and change your meditation object from one to another and investigate broadly like your sensations. Is that what you did? Or?
Yeah, that's the first retreat. All I did was body scanning, so I just did one thing. And then the second retreat, I did like I said, I did a little bit of the more broader approach. So I always say that the mixture for each person is different. So you gotta have to like sort of find the right combination for you. So for me, the fastest way was focusing on one thing, but then also dabbling in another. So my recommendation is always to have one core practice that you stick to every day. So for me, that was body scanning. So like, even though I was dabbling in a lot of other practices, like scanning on the sensors, self-inquiry, or even attempting to do like the do nothing meditation, I was still doing body scanning as my core practice every day. Yeah. So that's my recommendation. The way I compare the mental fitness is like fitness, on the physical level. You have to combine speed with strength to have power, right? In order to train an athlete to become as explosive and as athletic as he can, he has to be powerful. Yeah, and the power is speed times strength. And what's strength? Strength is your building up the muscle rep after rep, maybe doing like max after squat. And the speed is like your plyometrics, your sprint work, and jumping. Or maybe speed lifting, right? And what is speed in meditation? That's your Dzogchen kind of training, or awareness of awareness, right? Because like when they ask you to look for the seer, look for what's looking, it has to be very instantaneous, right? And if you look at awareness, awake awareness is instantaneous. It's way faster than the thought or emotions, right? So when you do like dual Vipassana, it's kind of slow. Or even when you try to intellectualize awakening or insight, when you try to think about it, it won't work, right? Because its thoughts are slow, right? But awareness is instantaneous. And so the strength part is your concentration, your contraction. You have to sort of build up that strength and combine it with speed to produce power. And I look at awakening is the expression of both the speed of the mind and the strength of the mind to create power.
Yeah, I love that comparison. That's I think it's really helpful as a thing to get really a sense for. Okay, I don't only need like to just say, okay, I'm already awake. Let me just see it right now. Then it's like it's not really it's as if you're not jumping high enough to get like all the way there.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
you need more strength first to
Ex-
jump right to the
exactly,
right height.
exactly. When I was doing, I increased my vertical jump from like 30 to like 40 inches, and the way I did that wasn't just by jumping. Of course, I did a lot of jumping. Like, you know, a lot of programs that you see online, they just ask you to like do this. They ask you to wear like ankle bracelet, just jump up and down, or just do plyometrics, box jumps. But then if you don't do squats, you're not gonna get up there. Yeah. And then and going back to how your the question about which one should I do, you know, how should I structure my practice? Like I said, just like athletes, different athletes need different kind of practice, right? If you're already very strong, you need more quickness, more pound matrix, more speed training to be able to transfer that strength into power, right? If you're already very quick, some athletes are like very fast to begin with. They're just genetic. That's how they're wired. They're very quick. They probably need more strength to jump higher, right? So they need to do more squats. Yeah. So you can apply that to mindfulness as well. You know, some people are really good at concentration, but then maybe you need to throw in a little bit of some Dzogchen kind of training, some abiding awareness. And talking about speed, it also, you know, like it takes a lot of speed of the mind to even if you hold this vast space, the sensation of like sensations arising and passing away is extremely rapid. And you need to, in order to like note that or to catch that or to dissolve that, you need like the quickness of the mind. That's why, you know, Shizhen Yang talk about gone, like noticing the moment that a sensation vanishes into nothingness. In order to even like punctuate the moment of sensation, you need to have a very quick mind, or like the way that you observe sensation arising out of emptiness, and you kind of have to follow the sensation, abide it, and then watch it go back to the source, right? The gone. To be able to complete that process, just to observe a single sensation, your mind needs to be pretty fast, not alone like, you know, noticing so many different sensations all at once. Like Daniel Ingram said, like when he was practicing, he was like focusing on speed a lot. That was what mind blew me at first when I read Daniel Ingram's book. He was like, okay, you have to focus on speed. It's all about speed. I was like, what? This is just like fitness. You also, not just concentration, you have to focus on the speed of the mind, right? He was like, oh, you can actually notice like not just one, because at first you can only notice one sensation, right? At least my experience when I read that book, I was like, I can only notice one sensation. And he was like, no, you can notice like 5, 10, 15, 20 sensations a second. I was like, how is that even possible? But then I realized that it takes practice. You know, your mind has to be very quick. But then ultimately, when you're locked in a natural state, when your realization is strong enough, you don't even need to do that anymore, because you realize this whole field is perceiving itself, and awareness and sensations are one. So everything becomes spontaneous and simultaneously aware of itself. So you can actually be aware of the entire field simultaneously. Yeah, or the field is aware of itself. So it's not 5 to 10 sensation a second. It's already on the slow side. You can actually perceive it all at the same time. But then that's actually what's already happening without the filtering of the ego, which slows everything down. Yeah, in a sort of linear fashion. Now in the more like a panoramic fashion, where this whole field is just contentizing itself in a sense.
Yeah, I was also really thankful for learning this from Daniel Ingram, because I mean, you can interpret other teachings saying the same thing as well, but they don't explicitly say, okay, it's about the speed. So that's really great that he said that. But as you also just said, it's important to know when to actually switch modes, because it's only perceived as fast from a certain point of view.
Yes. There is not.
And if you are past that, like still trying to catch it quick can also like keep you stuck.
Yes, you can actually become more contracted. Yeah, because the speed part only applies when you still have the witness, in a sense, when there's still a meditator. Yeah, after the meditator is deconstructed, you don't really perceive it as speed anymore. It's almost like the speed of light, I guess. You know, Einstein said the speed of light is the only constant in the universe. The speed of light is so fast that it's almost like still, like eternal. You can say awareness is kind of like the speed of light. It's the sort of like the constant you're in experience, where it's so instantaneous, it transcends even speed, right? So when you get to that stage, pretty much the only practice that is good is just do nothing meditation with a little bit of Vipassana when like conditions arise. Yeah.
So many of the things you just said, people have to kind of judge for themselves where they're at, if they are like very strong in concentration, or if they're maybe lacking there. In your experience, would you say people, or in your own experience as well, can one judge well while on the path where one is at with these different things and their development, or should one get a teacher maybe, and then the teacher can in interaction judge more easily what's best to do next? What was your experience there?
That's a good question, because I never thought about that before, because like throughout my path I just intuitively know what to do. Like I never had a teacher. I just read a bunch of stuff and I tried to apply it to myself. My own experience was that I've never had those glimpses where it wasn't permanent. And the reason for that is because I've been building my concentration up slowly and over the years. Every time I have a shift, let's say from like stream entry to second path, it's just stabilized. And I'm not saying there's no integration, but the sort of the shift was permanent each time. So I think the reason for that is because I've been practicing concentration for so many years, and some of my clients that I talk to, they haven't really did a lot of concentration work, but they have glimpses, right? Maybe the mind is very quick, so they can have like a glimpse, just by point on instruction. And then for people like that aren't able to like hold their realizations, I would say just go back to the basic, go back to the drawing board and practice concentration. Yeah, in my experience, you can never really have enough concentration, actually. Even in my state right now, if I practice concentration, that's still kind of useful sometimes, just like, when you interact with people, or like when you try to do work, even though it's, again, like I said, it's just happening by itself, the mind can still be more or less, even in the state of non-duality, the field can still be more or less concentrated both on the absolute level as a whole, or maybe within the absolute level on the conventional level of just focusing on maybe like doing work, maybe, or editing videos and stuff like that. Yeah, for me, concentration is important in that regard. And the people that I've talked to, people who are pretty good at observing sensations at the microscopic details, like they're really good at Vipassionalizing things, seeing the insight from a more or less like from a narrower lens, so to speak, but then they lack this this background space, so to speak. Although ultimately there's no more background foreground, but like throughout the path you can have a more concentrated mind and see the insights and deconstruct the sensations, and see them at the vibrating at the microscopic level. But some people might lack sort of the panoramic vastness of your peripheral awareness. So for those people, I'll say maybe let go a little bit and try to abide in the space more, and then see how that works out.
What would be the benefit to keep the awareness open, even though one is practicing maybe a concentration technique?
Well, I think what would be the benefit of that? Let me think about my own path for it. I think my concentration just got even better after I started to abide in the vast awareness. Yeah, at first it was just like, again, like a background. Chill Dao also said the same thing. At first you just concentrate on the breath, then you sort of relax that concentration more and more the deeper you go, and then you sort of now have to pay attention to even your peripheral awareness, while still try to concentrate on the object of the meditation, like the breath. So now first you have the breath, and you sort of expand your peripheral awareness to focus on the breath and try to hold the peripheral awareness at the same time. That's kind of like your Vipassana. And then eventually your identity shift from that, just focus on that, to the field. And now you're doing the concentration on the Vipassana from the field. And then you let go of that. And that's your do nothing meditation. Yeah, so I would say both expansion and contraction feed on each other in a sense, because the more you can contract, the more you can expand, and vice versa. Yeah, so just working on one carries over to the other one as well. Even just focusing on a single object of meditation really well, you need to relax into it. So like a cessation, you can't reach a cessation if you're not, or the jhanas, without relaxation as well, right? So it's always training both. Yeah, and then I think meditation, if you can really sum up in one sentence, it could be like the balancing act between alertness and dualness, or between like effort and effortlessness, between surrender, letting go, and concentration. So it's always the balancing act. One cannot exist without the other. So, but during the path, you can sort of focus on one over the other, but then ultimately they'll become one, just like I said earlier. If you only practice Vipassana without knowing anything about do nothing meditation, you are going to end up in the same spot as the Dzogchen practitioners. Yeah.
And usually that comes also with quite a bit of with quite a bit of variation in the practice, so it can lead to like some frustration because it's like oscillating. I've found like you become for a while very concentrated, but then you get a period of a lot of sleepiness or dullness, and you get like too relaxed, and you think, where's my concentration?
Oh yeah.
Can seem to get it back, but then it's coming back up, so it will at one point like level itself out to like the perfect level
Yes.
of the balance of the two. So I found when one is a little bit frustrated in one of the ends, then it usually is just a period of exploring that.
Yeah. I also like to mention this practice called TWIM. That stands for Tranquil Wisdom Insight Meditation. And this practice really combines everything and merge everything into one single practice. If you look at the TWIM instructions, it's actually based off of what the Buddha originally taught. And there's not a lot of people teaching it because not a lot of people even know about it. Almost everything that you read about Buddhism, even practice like body scanning or noting, concentration work, breath mindfulness, that's all just a modified version of what the Buddha originally taught in the Pali Canon. And the unique thing about TWIM is that it utilizes metta and loving kindness as the object of meditation, or as the catalyst to see insights and to release sufferings and to dissolve hindrances and resistance and contractions and conditioning and solidity, or whatever you want to call it. Whatever is getting in the way of recognizing true nature. And my friend who went to the retreat said this is the single most effective technique or system that he's came across, even though he's experimented with many techniques. According to my friend, half of the people there got stream entry, had a cessation, which is the Olympic gold medal level of meditation. If you look at the original sutras, Buddha talked about the jhanas a lot in loving kindness. Why? Because for him, you need to find something for the mind to chew on. And usually that's joy and happiness, because all the mind wants is to be happy. In the world of samsara, we are looking for happiness in worldly pleasures. But then the Buddha is like, okay, sure, the mind can have some pleasures, but instead of having worldly pleasures, why don't we replace that with jhanas? So it's almost like a rehab center for the mind. Why don't we transfer that attachment temporarily to the jhanas and the feeling of loving kindness and metta? And you're not trying to change or suppress anything. The Buddha realized that control is an illusion. So if you try to control something, if you try to suppress something, that doesn't go anywhere. That's why his most important teaching is the middle way. He went through all the ascetic things and taking the body to the extreme, not eating, not drinking, and then taking concentration to the extreme, taking this very absorbed form of jhanic practice to the extreme. But he's still not liberated. But the jhanas that the Buddha talked about, that is most effective for dissolving conditionings, is not a state of absorption, but rather this very delightful, serene, and relaxed type of joy. Now, most of the description of the jhanic state that you read about today, there's sort of the modified version, a different kind of jhana. Sure, there might be overlaps, of course, but the Buddha realized that this state of absorption is forcing yourself to access mystical experiences with a lot of energies. That isn't really the best way to alleviate suffering. That doesn't really go anywhere because you are sort of using craving to control craving. So if you try really hard to cultivate a jhana through the state of absorption, that's kind of like a craving, that's kind of like a desire. And as soon as you get off the cushion, when the jhana state is over, it's like taking a psychedelic drug. When it wears off, all your habitual tendencies are still there. They're not getting released, they're simply getting suppressed temporarily. The most optimal way to release resistance and cravings is not control or straining efforts, but simply to relax. If you tell an alcoholic to stop drinking, which part of the self is doing that? And which part of the self is the real self? Is the one that wants to drink the real self? Or is the one that's trying to suppress the one who wants to drink the real self? Or neither? Right? For the Buddha, none of that matters. What you want to do is you want to approach all sensations and all cravings in a very relaxed way. You simply notice them, release them, and then relax. Instead of trying to control and change everything, you simply let things be the way they are, and whatever needs to be released will be released. So again, this is a little bit like do nothing meditation.
with an emphasis on metta, but still taking mindfulness into the equation by recognizing where the contractions and the resistance are. And bring your attention in a much broader and more expansive space of awareness to the feeling of loving kindness. And that is your object of meditation. And then anytime the hindrances come up, you simply release them. And just to notice where the contractions are, that also takes some kind of mindfulness. But then you're not like deconstructing them. You just sort of like, move your attention away from them and then relax. If you stop giving attention to, stop giving fuels to the hindrances and contractions, they'll dissolve spontaneously. Sure, if you look at the Buddha's path, he did a lot of straining. I did a lot of straining before I knew how to relax. So, that's still part of your path. And maybe for some people, you need a few years of just like hardcore Vipassana, hardcore drilling every sensation down to the microscopic particles and dissolving them into empty space for you to learn how to relax. Let everything in the present moment be exactly the way it is without interference or control. But from this approach, right from the beginning, you just relax. But you're still applying some kind of effort in there. It's just not too much straining or force. It's all about finding that balance, that perfect balance between effort and effortlessness, between intention and surrendering, between doing and non-doing, between, again, contraction and expansion. That's the middle way. And like I said earlier, the entry point for that, sort of the catalyst for this kind of practice, is the feeling of loving kindness, joy, and the jhanas, which under this context, they're the same thing. In the Eightfold Path, the Buddha talks about, right effort. And for him, right effort simply means the middle way. The word craving is mentioned a lot in the sutras, right? Well, not craving leads to suffering, but what exactly is craving? Craving simply means a kind of a tension or a contraction somewhere usually in the head or in the body. That's it. You don't even to analyze what you're craving. So you can have 10 chocolate cakes without craving, actually. If your body and mind isn't contracted while you're eating a chocolate cake, and after you finish the chocolate cakes, you're not thinking about, when am I going to have more chocolate cake or feeling guilty about it, then in fact, there is no craving. So nothing's off limit. So the technique for the TWIM practice, they call it the 6 R's. But just to simplify, I'm just going to make it the 4 R's. So every time a hindrance comes up, you simply recognize it. That's the first R. And the second R, you release it. The third R, relax. And this is a very important step, relax. Because even the effort to try to release something, there's still a tiny bit of effort in there. So when you just relax, that's the do nothing meditation. The fourth R is re-smile. When you smile during your meditation, it makes the mind a lot lighter and it makes awareness a lot quicker. And you just have more fun doing it. You're not struggling, you're not forcing anything. You see the Buddha statue, what does it look like? The Buddha just having a little smile. That's why it was depicting. When the Buddha was meditating, he realized that one of the most important factor is having fun and smile and the feeling of joy. Put that smile on your face, put that smile on your mind, put that smile in the heart, or even in the eyes. And don't take things so seriously. I mean, it is a serious practice, it's a serious path, but you don't have to be serious. And the Buddha realized that. It's like when people just have fun doing the practice, the progress is way faster. The Buddha is a chikikan. He realizes the best way to get people to see really deep insights into like emptiness, no self, or dependent origination is to make people have fun doing it and not take things so seriously.
Waiting for me to save God.
I think the Joker is onto something here, right? I think the Joker is much closer to enlightenment than the Batman. The Joker is kind of a manifestation of reverse enlightenment. He just do things without any plans, without a doer, and things just kind of happen without expectations or assumptions. Right? I was reading the study done by Jeffrey Martin, who interviewed like thousands and thousands of people that shifted into non-duality, and he said that the number one hindrance for people that didn't shift into non-duality is reading too much about spirituality beforehand, or having too much expectations about the path. So if you just stay with this delightful feeling of loving kindness and joy, you are going to access the jhanas. You are going to access very, very deep states of consciousness, provided the fact that you know how to deal with the hindrances by being mindful of where your attention is going, where your attention is contracting when you are being distracted by thoughts, for example. This is a very important point. So instead of trying to suppress or change or even stop thinking or any kind of hindrances or feelings, you're simply observing where your attentions are trying to grasp onto these sensations. You simply letting it go. and let them be the way they are. Because if you don't give a sensation fuel, if you don't pay attention to it, it's gonna dissolve and be let go of spontaneously and be dissolved into love. And don't forget to smile. Neuroscientists did this study where they just put pencil in between people's teeth. Even if they're not in a particularly happy mode, their mind will feel uplifted. So when you do this kind of practice, the first quarter of the practice, if you do a 30-minute practice, the first 10 minutes you practice the metta, especially and particularly self-metta. You say things like, may I be happy, may I be free from suffering, or may all beings be happy, may all beings be liberated from suffering. So you just keep bringing that loving kindness feeling to the heart and to the body. Or you can imagine holding a very cute animal, or you can imagine holding a baby. Just a very neutral object that allows your mind to be concentrated on in order to elicit this feeling of loving kindness. And that is your object of meditation. So instead of this one pointedness absorption in like Vipassana, for example, this kind of mindfulness is a more collected one. It's a more flexible one, lighter one, where you just simply unify the mind and let it sink into this feeling of loving kindness and let this energy grow. At first, it's going to be in your heart. Then eventually, when you enter the latter jhanas, you're spreading that across the infinite sphere of consciousness or into the entire universe. And you just abide there until the hindrances and the resistance come up again. And then you run through the 4 Rs. But you're using this field of loving kindness to recognize, release, and then relax back into the feeling of loving kindness again. And then abide there for as long as you can until the next hindrances come up. And each time you run through the cycle of the 4 Rs, the mind becomes more and more purified, more and more collected, more and more delightful, and more concentrated in a much broader open awareness kind of way. And you go deeper and deeper into more subtle levels of the mind where the really deep conditionings and the solidities and the defilements lies. And this is how you continue to expand consciousness, enter deeper jhanas, and eventually reaching a cessation. So it's kind of like doing Vipassana, what I call doing Vipassana, from the perspective of the God mind, but with the flavor of love. The feeling of loving kindness, this metta feeling, is actually the greatest weapon to dissolve conditionings and hindrances and distractions. So it's not enough to just accept a contraction or let them be there as it is. You have to take an extra step of giving it love. And this is how you enter the jhanas. And you hear a lot of people saying, you can get addicted to jhanas and the feeling of joy or whatever during meditation. Sure, that's why in the TWIM practice, they say that even when joy arises, treat it as another sensation that you relax into and release. So you're kind of just using the feeling of loving kindness or the jhanas as a means to an end. It's not like you want to be stuck there. You want to abide in it until the mind becomes disenchanted with this jhana, and then you move on to the next jhana and the next jhana. Eventually, you reach a cessation where even perception, even consciousness, even awareness itself disappears, and your entire universe just stops. And that is Nibbana. If you do this practice right, when your mind becomes very tranquil without any hindrances, you'll start to see the links of dependent origination. You start to see exactly how the mind is operating at the deepest level and how suffering is created due to very specific causes and conditionings. The Buddha said, if you don't see dependent origination, you don't see the Buddha mind. And if you see the dependent origination in real time, you will be liberated. And in Vipassana meditation, you talk about seeing the 3 characteristics like dukkha, no self, and impermanence. You can see all those 3 insights without seeing dependent origination. But if you see the 12 links of dependent origination, you are going to see no self, impermanence, and suffering simultaneously. But dependent arising at the deepest level actually means non-arising. Cause and effect is empty without time or space. Now, I'm not going to go into the details about the links of dependent origination or even what jhana is what, or even if this is really what the Buddha taught. None of that matters. Don't believe anything you read or hear, just try and see for yourself. But if you just practice the 4 Rs, see, the 4 Rs really is the technique that allows you to sort of unlink a whole cascade in the stacks of dependent origination to reach the cessation of suffering. I talk about cessations a lot, but what exactly is a cessation? Cessation can mean different things on a different context, but even just releasing that contraction and tension of the craving, you're already experiencing kind of a mini cessation. But at the deepest level, a cessation is the complete cessation of consciousness itself. Again, I've said this before, you let go of even consciousness. You let go of the 5 aggregates and even consciousness itself. The insight is that all is dependent on arising. Even consciousness is dependent on arising. If this arises, that arises. If this ceases, that ceases. Everything, including consciousness or perception or awareness, is part of this impersonal causes and conditionings. So the self cannot hold on to anything, not even consciousness, as the ground. Right? If there's only this chain, this river of cause and effect that's totally impersonal, there cannot be a controller that is the source of any phenomena. Now, just to sum things up on the TWIM techniques, here's what you do. You abide in the feeling of loving kindness and use that as your object of meditation. And then anytime attention or contraction or hindrances come up, or anytime you're lost in thought, you simply recognize it, that's the first art, and then release it, second art. And the third art, relax. And the fourth art, re-smile, and then repeat the process. Now, with all that said, I'm not saying the hardcore Vipassana, hardcore contraction that I've been talking about in my previous videos is bad. That's one way to go about it. That's one kind of practice. And total relaxation, the do nothing meditation, total expansion, that's another way to go about it. But there's also the middle way, the perfect merging and the balance of both contraction and expansion with a splash of metta. So I think the reason why the TWIM practice is so effective because it combines a lot of different practices, immerse them into one package. And how do you know what techniques work for you? So which one do you need depends on where you are in your practice, where in your life, how your brain is wired, like your background, the tradition you follow, or even like in this moment. So they just keep practicing different styles until you have this built-in AI, like consciousness AI, and then you go through life like a mixed martial artist or Spider-Man. Spider-Man, when he's like swinging around the buildings, he's kind of practicing like spontaneity, the way he moves, like maneuvers around the city, the fluidity of it. You probably read about hundreds of different techniques, but in reality, there's only a few categories. Whatever techniques that you hear on the internet can be boiled down to a few very simple categories. The entire paradigm of spiritual practices and techniques can be placed somewhere within a triangle. And one point of this triangle is contraction, your mindfulness and concentration work. And another point is expansion, your do nothing meditation and surrendering. And another point is self-inquiry. And then you have psychedelics or shadow works or whatever other alternative techniques like breath work outside of this triangle. It's for like this fourth leg. But really, all boils down to those 3 points on a triangle. Contraction, expansion, and self-inquiry. If you practice enough contraction, it would carry over to the expansion and vice versa. And that would carry over to the self-inquiry. And the self-inquiry will carry over to the other 2 as well. So there's really only one single practice. And the most important thing is to see the interconnectivity between the practices and how they work with each other and how they carry over to each other. Most people can't get anything out of self-inquiry in the beginning because they lack concentration. Most people can't get a lot out of concentration because they don't know how to relax and surrender into the object of concentration. And most people can't expand to infinity because the mind is like a rubber band. The more you can contract, the more you can expand. Again, you want to be an infinite shapeshifter, mixed martial artist of the mind. And your brain is going to be equipped with this inner consciousness AI that allows you to just shapeshift and take whatever tool that you need in this particular moment, whatever is most practical and pragmatic in this moment. Towards the end of your path or even after awakening, that's all going to be spontaneous. It's all going to be self-driving. But during the path, it's important to kind of experiment with different techniques and see which one works for you. For some people, one technique takes them all the way. For Nisargadatta, it's just self-inquiry, asking who I am for 2 years. For another person, it's body scanning Vipassana. Myself, 85% body scanning. For another consciousness athlete, maybe is 95% do nothing meditation. How do you know what works for you? The easiest way to determine that is to try a technique for a month or at least 2 weeks every day for at least an hour. And then see what that does to your brain and nervous system and see if you notice any changes in perception, whether your mind is more still, more silent, whether your emotional triggers have been reduced, or whether the vast spaciousness is open up more. If your moment-to-moment direct experience, your default state of consciousness is not upgraded, then you might not be making progress. It doesn't matter how much insight you see during meditation, how much mystical experiences, and how much jhanas you access during the meditation. It doesn't matter how much psychedelics you take. If off the cushion, you're not seeing permanent shift in baseline consciousness, then you're not making progress. So you try a technique out for 2 weeks or a month, and every day just try that one technique for at least 45 minutes to an hour. Why? If you go into your meditation, you'll see that at the 45-minute mark, that's when things start to happen. That's when the practice really started to work. That's when the magic started to unfold. If this particular technique doesn't work for you after 2 weeks or a month, switch to another one. And you just keep switching until you find the ones that are the most effective for you, because everybody has a different nervous system. It's like trying different exercise to see which one yields the most muscle gains. Maybe for the contraction one, you do body scan, you do that for 2 weeks. And then the next week, you can do the do nothing meditation. And then for the next phase or next period of progressive overload, taking a term from fitness, you do self-inquiry, right? And then the different variation of each point of the triangle. You can, try them on in the next round or whatever, and see which one works for you, and see which combination of practice works for you. Because not everyone can just take a single practice and take it to the end point. For most people, it's a combination of different practices. It's just like fitness, to find out what exercise works for your own particular body type and your goals, you have to stick with the same thing for a period of time so that your body can adapt to the new stimuli. So self-inquiry is also called the 90-90 method. So 90-90-90 means not this, not this, not that, not that. So anything that arises in your direct experience, you just label it in a visceral way. You kind of have to feel it out. Not just intellectually. Now, this is not me. This is not self, right? 90-90-90. Not this, not that. So it's very easy in the beginning when you just perceive a cup and you're like, oh, this is not me. It's easy, right? But then you start to know sensations too. The sound. Oh, sound is rising, not this. The visual field is rising, not that. When you get to the mind, it gets a little tricky. Can you perceive thought? Can you look at the thought of yourself? If you can look at it, if you can perceive it or experience it, it's not this, not that, right? So it's just kind of peeling away the layers of the onion, right? And then when you go down to the very deep end of it, you start to perceive even the witness. Can you witness the witness? If you can witness the witness is also not self. Can you perceive perception itself? Perception is also not self. Can you be aware of awareness? Can you be conscious of consciousness? Can you perceive even God consciousness? If so, if you have an experience of God consciousness, then it's still something that's arising in the experience. Then you simply objectify that as well, saying, oh, that's not me, not self. So you kind of objectify everything in your direct experience until the subject vanishes. You turn everything into an object, right? So once you turn everything in your direct experience, including this whole field of consciousness, into an object, then where's the subject? It disappears into it. So one way to look at it is that there's only the object, there's only the world, and there's no self. And another way to look at it is that there's only the subject, always self, there's no object. So that's another way to merge the true self and the no self school, right? Delete the duality between subject and object.
What is your view on psychedelics and their role for the spiritual path or spiritual insight?
For me, psychedelics and meditation are actually just the same thing. They're just tools to decondition the mind so you can return to the mind's natural state. I look at psychedelics, if done correctly, as sort of like shadow work on steroids. And if you look at Vipassana or even do nothing meditation, it's also just shadow work. You pretty much just, do nothing meditation. You sit there, do nothing, and let your shadows surface, let your conditions surface. And then once you just let them go without any resistance, then you become awake. Right, and then Vipassana is sort of like going into the opposite direction and try to you digging out the solidity of the conditioning with effort and with energy and power, right, and concentration. And psychedelics does the same thing, pretty much. why do you think people, when they take a psychedelic, they experience things like breathing or the colors morphing, and like just, you know, they lose the solidity of their body, because their mind and their experiential apparatus is becoming more malleable and softer, because they're going through a process of dissolution. Yeah. Yeah, so it's the same thing. But a lot of people who don't know this, they get caught up in the content of the psychedelics instead of just letting the dissolution happen at the physical level. In my experience, every single mixed state of experience that you experience on psychedelics or even meditation are just the byproduct and the symptoms and the side effects of that physical dissolution. Yeah. And the only reason why you don't feel like you're non-dual or like one with the world universe, whatever you want to call it, is because of the solidity in the body mind. That's the only thing that creates separation, and that those solidity are just a manifestation of traumas and conditioning that's stored in the body. Yeah, I would say I think psychedelics is a really good supplementation to meditation or any kind of spiritual practice. But I think even doing psychedelics, you still have to, like, quote unquote, do the work. Yeah. So the most I got out of psychedelics was after I started to really know how to meditate. Because before that, I didn't know what I was looking for, first of all. And second of all, I didn't even have even during psychedelic trips, you still have to, like, look for the insights, look for the state of emptiness or no self, you know. It's a lot easier for a lot of people during those states to see those insights because their minds are dissolving, their egos are dissolving. Yeah, so it's much clearer to see the inside, but then you still have to sort of apply some kind of, at least some kind of concentration, some kind of relaxation to be able to get the most benefit out of psychedelics. So if you already have some kind of meditation practice under your belt and then you do psychedelics, that's why I feel like psychedelic is the most beneficial. Yeah, so the way I tell my clients is like, you can sort of superset psychedelics with a retreat. That's on sort of like a more macro level. You go to a retreat once a year, maybe have a DMT trip, especially like 5-MeO DMT trip, which is probably the most potent psychedelics. It's pretty much, for a lot of people, you get a full glimpse of the God mind or non-dual awareness or the nature of mind, like that, because it just somehow dissolves all your condition at once in like a matter of seconds. But then it always comes back. Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, you know, maybe you have one 5-MeO trip once a year and a retreat once a year, and then maybe, like, you know, lighter psychedelics, maybe like microdosing, or maybe just like half a tab or half of LSD or psilocybin, like a few grams, like once every few months. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think with microdosing, you can every weekend maybe you can have a session where you microdose and do meditation, maybe. Yeah, that could be good. But then at the same time, a lot of people all got that glimpse through psychedelics before they even got into meditation too. Yes, a lot of people, actually, a lot of teachers in the West. Yeah. Yeah. So maybe you give a complete beginner who don't know anything about psychedelics or meditation, give them a psychedelic trip first, let them see the possibility, and then build their concentration or their meditation skills up, and then slowly try to dose them, like, in a more like sequential way, or like the psychedelics. Yeah. The most I can say is meditation or the state reveals to you very clearly the nature of experience, or the nature of mind, and how that mind is relating to reality. That is another question that people have debating about over, like, different traditions debate about it differently for thousands of years, right? And the way I look at it is that, first of all, it doesn't really matter at the end. At the end, you kind of just completely let that go, because it's only sort of letting go of your projection to understanding anything intellectually, or to make any claims about the nature of reality. That at the end, I find creates more resistance and suffering than if you just let it go. And just by letting that go, as a matter of experience, reality can actually recognize itself at an even deeper level. Like, my realization went through just got a lot deeper after I stopped contemplating about these things. Because like, you know, if you still know something, if the mind still thinks it knows something, there's still a duality. There's still a distance, a gap between the knower and the known. So the paradox is, after you let go of any kind of claim onto the ontology of experience, your state or realization actually takes a sharper and deeper turn. Yeah. Yeah. And if you want to just speak about it from the more ontological level, on the more conventional level, I'll say I think going with the process of co-origination or dependent origination, you know, the middle way is probably where I lean towards. I mean, you experience the mind, and there's a reality out there, but then the mind and reality cannot exist independently, right? They codependent arise, right? So you say that I understand the nature of mind, and a lot of teachers say understand the nature of mind is understanding the nature of reality. That's true in a certain extent, because mind is part of reality. Not only does it co-arise with reality, it is part of reality, and vice versa. Yeah. So after you transcend the whole idealism or materialism paradigm or solipsism, you realize that I guess the co-arising, codependent viewpoint, where you sort of it's all of it. All of it is true. You know, just how it depends on which lens you choose to look at, right? And in the mind and reality is sort of like this infinite shapeshifter anyway, right? It's always changing. So like all of them are true. You know, it depends on what kind of lens you want to slap on when you talk to, like, when I talk to materialists, I can talk about the brain, how meditation changes your brain, how it's just you're pretty much hacking your entire brain. You're waking up from the thought of you to the whole mind. I can say it like that. If I talk to a non-dualist, hardcore non-dualist, I can have a conversation about how there is no brain, how the brain is arising in consciousness, that everything is consciousness, right? Yeah. So I'm pretty flexible about that stuff, because I don't really cling on to any of the viewpoints. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think the level that you're speaking from, it's immediately recognized what the substance of such or any ontological view actually is. Like, you are on the level of, okay, I'm experiencing these contemplations about reality for what they are. Like, they are just like sounds in the mind, words, or like, and this is more immediate and more direct, and in the sense, in the moment, more true. So whatever is coming out of your mouth, on the level of whether it's like pointing to something true or not, that's secondary, right?
Yes, that's a good way to put it. At the level of sensation, or at the level of awareness, whatever you want to call it, the same substance applies, using the same no substance to talk about like any kind of ontology, or to talk about even to talk about, to gossip about, like, you know, some Netflix TV show, or like, you know, the tabloids, whatever. It's using the same substance. When you're abiding in the substance, you just don't really care about the content that much anymore.
And talking about these things, like, it makes clear that if you are stuck in from the viewpoint that you have to know what reality is, that like it's a real thing for you, it's like you have to answer this, then usually the problem is still somewhere else.
Yes.
It's not in the answer. Like, you won't get this thing by hearing something or thinking about something.
Yes.
No, it's pointing to some deeper truth that, like, it's actually pushing me in the direction of searching for this ground of reality, but not as a conceptual thing, but as a experienced reality.
Yes. I think that the need to know through the mind, the answer to what reality is, this is the byproduct of just the rest of your solidity or your ego condition that hasn't been dissolved. So that's the deeper issue. Once you dissolve all the solidities and our condition in the body mind, those questions and answers will dissolve as well. Yeah. So for those people, I'll just tell them to just examine the solidity in your body mind instead of trying to look for an intellectual answer. Like the analogy that I give is the difference between the hardware and the software on the computer. You know, when people get into spirituality, they think it's about like upgrading the software, but it's actually hacking the hardware. When you hack the hardware, when you change your entire nervous system, when you upgrade your experiential apparatus, the software will also change, sure. But then if you try to temper the software with more software, when you try to like buckle down and really examine the the nature of reality through thought, with thought, then you can never really get there in a sense. Yeah.
And it's an endless process as well. Like the thought can always create another thing
Yes.
that it needs to know or that it wants to have satisfied. So
Yes. Yes.
you can always ask another why this, why that, why is this happening, why then, you know, you will never come to an end
Yeah.
with an explanation. Yeah, so that's really true. And I think this is hinting at something deeper, and which I also wanted to ask you about is when it's not about creating mental stories that make us happy or satisfied, what then, like, what is happiness on a deeper level? Like, through your whole journey, you have, I think, discovered, and it's really what people want, like, you have discovered a deeper serenity, happiness, peacefulness. So, from your point of view, what is happiness or peacefulness? What is it really?
For me, happiness is just the nature of mind without conditionings. Yeah, so happiness without conditionings. So happiness is a really tricky word because happiness and sadness go together. Happiness like a human emotion in a sense. I say that the natural state is not exactly a state of happiness like the way most people experience happiness. Because when you talk about happiness on the more conventional level, it's always dependent on something. You know, if I get this car, I'll be happy. If I get this girlfriend, I'll be happy. Right? So the happiness that I speak about, it's more like, I guess the better word is equanimity, or like the sort of this background context in which both happiness and sadness arise from. Yeah. And of course, on the level of the conventional level of the Mitsu, you can still make a distinction, sure, between like happiness or sadness, even after realization. And after realization, I'll say from that perspective, from the more relative perspective, I'm pretty much like 99% happier, just because like the content of my experience is now the same as the context. So the content can change, but the context, which is that state of equanimity that transcends both happiness and sadness, is just there all the time. Like, you know, just some traditions talk about the nature of awake awareness just being in the background all the time. Yeah, so that to me is what quote unquote happiness is. Happiness without conditionings. And like we talked about earlier, this whole path is about dissolving conditionings. So you kind of just be 100% satisfied and peaceful with whatever is happening right now. Like, because you can't be any other way, and you're not deluded by thoughts about like the past or the future or any thoughts about what the ego wants. Things like that just are seen through. And when it's seen through, it's pretty much experiencing happiness without conditionings, because all those are conditionings.
Yeah. So I think for some people who are listening to this, the question could come up, okay, how then, when you are like have leveled out happiness and sadness to just the level of general equanimity that you feel no matter like whether you're happy or not.
Yes, exactly.
How then like does it come that you are still motivated to do anything? Like, why is that still happening?
I'm not motivated to do anything anymore, actually. I'm pretty dispassionate about everything now. But then I'm still still doing things. I'm still doing this interview. I'm still creating content, although less frequently than before. But I'm still, doing a lot of the things that I used to do. I still like lift weights. But where I'm coming from is completely different. Yeah, like I'm not doing any of this stuff for ego gratification anymore. I'm not doing it because I want to look better. I just enjoy the process, of itself. Of course, like looking better is great. Like, and nothing wrong with looking better, right? But then it's not really my goal anymore. I'm just, I don't know why I do anything anymore, to be honest. It's just kind of, it's just happening. Maybe some of those things that I do now is maybe like old patterns that I sort of like preserve just because, why not? It's healthy for the body to exercise. Why not? And then when I create those content, for example, it's for some people find it helpful. But to be honest, at the root of it, I'm not really doing it for other people nor for myself. It just happens. It's just kind of, so Adeshante said there's like a sort of the switch from like a personal will to divine will. And at first you're doing everything based on the gratification of the ego, so that's all just personal will. And then once you start to see through the illusion of the doer, the center, then the divine will takes over. But ultimately, the divine will and the personal will are merged as one, you know. So one way that I look at this process is it's just a very physical and biological process of deconditioning your mind, so you go back to how your body and brain has always been wired before all the karmas and conditioning start to pile up. So if you're wired to become a good runner, for example, well, you're probably going to become a more efficient runner, a better runner, and a happier runner, without the filters of what you were doing before to gratify the ego. So after realization, you continue to do things. You sort of return to how this body and mind is inclined to do, is wired to do. But then if you really ask that body and mind, why is it doing that? It's just the way it's wired naturally. It doesn't really have a reason. There are certain things that I had to let go of, like throughout the process, because they're just not serving me, and if I do them, I contract. And nowadays, whatever I do, it doesn't contract me. If it contracts me, the reality just won't take me there, in a sense. So that's part of the integration. When you ask me, why do you do anything? The things that I'm still doing right now, most of them don't contract me at all. So that's why I'm still doing them. Because they're just going in accordance to the flow of nature. So I did have to like drop certain things that would contract me. But then with those things returned, I don't know. And people always ask me, do I have to let go of everything? In a sense, you do have to let go of everything. But the things that come back, you do them without effort, spontaneously, and they're just kind of nature's way of unfolding. That's how you're wired to do. And the things you let go of, they don't serve you, so you're not going to miss them.
Great. I have heard you also talk about or mention Rob Burbea in the past. And he I think has this whole I don't know if he has created it or if he just taught it, but it's this idea of like soul making dharma.
Yes.
Where it's like after emptiness you choose like consciously, okay, in which direction do I want this to go?
Yes.
Do you have experience with that?
I think that what I just talked about earlier is kind of like that. Like there, it's like after the emptiness, what do? You have to like, some tradition talk about filling the emptiness with love, or like you just practice compassion, or you start to create art. You start to fill those emptiness with form, so to speak, and realize they're actually one and the same thing, right? So I'm not sure if I consciously decide. So much so, like before, I would have like inner voice telling me what to do, and I'll have like inner struggles. Or should I do this or that? What am I gonna get out of this? What is the result of this? But now I get that voice is almost completely gone. Like I just do things, right? And then the things that I do, I guess you could say that's part of the soul making process after emptiness. I think everything after you realize emptiness could be part of the soul making process. Even if you just sit in the cave and do nothing all day, that's how you decide to manifest emptiness. That's your soul making process. Then great. And if you decide to be a porn star, then great, right? But then you're definitely going to do those things after emptiness with a totally different perspective.
You mentioned Dzogchen earlier, which is also pointing in similar directions with much of their practices. Are you exploring this at the moment, or have you practiced something of that in the past?
I think Dzogchen talks about Tantra or something, or maybe the Jhanas. Basically, Tantra is just basically taking the practice of emptiness to real life. So I think that's what we talked a little bit about earlier too. It's like after the realization, you sort of have to take this new card, this new operating system, to hold it while you do everyday things. Like for example, if I go out on the street and talk to like a girl or something, like that used to be a very deep condition of mine, like picking up girls. And if I do that now through this new perspective, what remainder of the solidity or the remainder of conditioning karmas gets triggered during that process? And if so, then then you let this this view, or let this empty space sort of dissolve it, right? So because I think a lot of times when you're doing the practices on the cushion, it's hard to get triggered when you're just like sitting by yourself, right? So that's the reason why in Dzogchen practice they tell you to take your practice off the cushion, is because you're not going to be able to see some of the blind spots when it's like silent on the cushion, right? So when you just go on and live normal life and take your practice, when you, for example, sex, people associate Tantra with sex. Why is sex such a popular practice of Tantra? It's because for most of us, sex is what is the thing that sort of trigger your unconscious desire the most. And if you can stay conscious during a sexual act, then you can really bring out some of the more deep-rooted conditionings. Yeah, so it's not just sex. It's even like in talking to girls, for example, or just talking to your friend, or maybe just spending time with your family, or maybe, you're lifting weights, right, in that state, yeah. And I think that this process of unfoldment, this transition from practicing like on the cushion to after realizing emptiness and then taking your practice off the cushion, I think it's pretty spontaneous. It's just like after realizing, what do? You live life again. And then throughout like living life as try to integrate this experience and this realization to real life, you are going to bump into like a situation where more or less you can trigger some of your old karmas, and then you just let them come out and you just surrender to them, let the vast awareness dissolve them, because the awareness dissolves everything. Yeah. So now the only work you have to do is to like access that awareness, because it's already there, is to do things that would either consciously or unconsciously, but regardless, you are going to run into situations where your karmas might get triggered anyway. So you just let the awareness dissolve it. That's where the practice is for Tantra.
Yeah, from this point of view, you could also, I think, say, okay, now you have a better operating system that's better able to handle more situations, like with less suffering and less friction, but still reality will present you with challenges. So
exactly.
It's not like entirely going to be eliminated from that point of view. You just have a better tool set to like deal with those things that are coming at you, and in order to like not like restrict and restrain yourself from these experiences, but to actually seek them out a little bit, so that you are like, oh, let's see, what can I learn from this? How can I like maybe even improve my view and ability to deal with things?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They say wake up, clean up, grow up, right? And then it's for a lot of people on the spiritual path. They don't wake up first and they start doing the cleanup, and that's kind of like putting a lipstick on a pig. It's like you're just creating more conditioning to clean up the conditionings you already have, and they go in a circle. But if you wake up first, if you lock in that awake awareness, now you can truly do the cleanup, because whatever that's left over of the things that hasn't been completely cleansed out is going to be sucked into the infinite, like spontaneously anyway. So that's why in that order, you wake up, clean up, and then you grow up. You after the cleaning is done, you sort of I guess you could say return to society, and then learn how to be a human again. And it's funny because that's when you really become an adult, I think. Yeah, I think that at first when you wake up, you're like a little baby learning how to walk, and then you clean up and you grow up, and once you start to grow up and then you realize, wait, I've never actually was an adult, even before awakening, when I thought maybe I'm in my late 20s or 30s, I thought I was an adult, but I'm actually wasn't even born. And now I became awake, I'm a baby now. Oh, okay, I'm becoming an adult for the first time. And you see that people who are just stuck in their minds, they actually never learned how to grow up. But at the same time, you still maintain that childlike innocence too, like going back to the stillness and spontaneous thing, like the duality between like speed and strength. Like if you look at realized people, they're very still. I guess they're very like because awareness is like very dense, right? It's like a diamond. Some traditions you use the word diamonds. The realization is very dense, very still, but at the same time that it's very spontaneous as well. So like you have the perfect immersion of like a childlike innocence, like the playfulness that's with like the quote unquote wisdom of timeless wisdom, so to speak. So it's you get the best of both worlds. I feel like you get to play as an adult.
Yeah.
Now you don't take things so seriously.
just to make it more clear again for people, what leads to suffering? What led to suffering before? So when dissolution of ego and constriction leads to freedom and equanimity, again, like, how would you describe what leads then to suffering?
I think suffering is just a constriction of a certain energy field. Yeah. So whatever maintains the separation, or even increases or intensify the illusion of separation, which leads to a contraction of energy at the physical, emotional, perceptual level, that's what creates suffering. That's pretty much it. I think suffering is pretty much just the resistance to what is, and the ego is just the resistance to what is. The what is this vast open space, or this, just the universe spontaneously doing itself, and whatever it resists that, it's always gonna experience some kind of contraction, and the contraction is what leads to the suffering. Even when you talk about the now, even like, just the past and the future, the thoughts about the past and the future is sort of like contraction as well. It's sort of like this layers of conditioning that you're laying on top of the present moment. Yeah. Yeah, so that's why a lot of suffering are associated with, like, thinking about the past, or like the anxiety about the future. Yeah, because thoughts like that are also just contractions of energies that creates the illusion of separation. Yeah, separating yourself from the now, in a sense.
Yeah, great. Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you are working with people right now? Because you said earlier you are like, you have clients that you help in this process. Just what does this look like, or how are you working with them? Are you recommending specific things, or what's your teaching style? How is that going to work? If people are looking for a teacher and they're thinking about like contacting you, what would it look like?
It's pretty free flow, actually. People just ask me questions for like an hour. Usually my sessions like an hour. Sometimes I give guided meditations if they want. Yeah, and then it all depends on the client. Like, I don't have any plan ever for a call. Like, I just depend on what they tell me. I have a pretty good intuitive understanding of where they are and what they need. So I just tell them, like, on the spot. And I think most of them find my recommendations pretty helpful. Yeah, like for example, like we talked about earlier, if this client needs more work on concentration, then I tell them that. If they're stuck in like content during the psychedelic trips, or even if they're attached to some of their previous like realizations, I just point that out a little bit. Yeah. It's not very structured, honestly. It's pretty much just a conversation like this, except they ask me more specific questions about their journey and where they're stuck in practice, or if they have like questions about like ontological stuff, I can discuss that as well.
Great. Yeah. I found this helpful during my past as well, just to have sometimes someone who I can ask questions to. So I would also say if someone is thinking about like getting their questions directly answered by someone like you, I would definitely also say like, just give it a try and see directly how helpful it can be, and then it doesn't hurt to get your practice in order or your questions answered directly. Sometimes there's nuance to that, so reading up on the internet can sometimes be a little bit unspecific.
Yes. Some of my clients ask very, very specific questions, especially people that are already doing the practice and maybe read the books that I recommended, or that they ask very specific questions and that I don't really talk about like in my videos and stuff. So those are great.
Yeah, great. I will definitely